I know I usually only talk about comics, but there's something else I felt like talking about today. Let me tell you about Spacemen. One of the first films to feature the idea of an alien was Le Voyage dans la Lune, a silent picture in 1902, probably most famous today for the shot of the protagonists landing on the moon. The film itself was only about 12 minutes, which was common for the time, but like many stories from that period, immediately treated the alien natives to the moon as villains, as a threat. Now, I'm not going to dig too far into the significance of this. I don't want to get off track. The point I'm trying to make is that, as far as we can really tell, humanity has had an innate fear of the unknown, especially when that unknown quantity is capable of any degree of harm, rather than something placid and harmless. But plenty of creatives have known this. H.G. Wells, Robert Wise, H.P. Lovecraft, don't Google his cat, and of course, Sir Ridley Scott. In the late 1970s, he crafted a historic piece of horror cinema that, to this day, stands as both a grade A source of dread and of contemplative sci-fi. It's also a franchise that reminds you with a deadly certainty that in space, no one can hear you scream. So, to the newbies, welcome, and to the oldies, welcome back. Let's talk about Alien and the films that followed. Alright, so I'll go over it, but part of me wants to avoid talking about spoilers because the whole thing is that good. But another part of me knows that it's a 43-year-old film with 7 sequels and an upcoming Disney Plus show, so what would really be the point? Let's start with what sounds like a gripe about this movie. It is slow. Like the whole thing is 2 hours, but could probably be summed up in a few paragraphs. The film is set in an undescribed future within a space freighter. We don't know much about the further universe because the focus is on the characters. The world itself is more so just another piece of the genuinely beautiful set design. Conceptually, the whole thing is pretty simple. These people get a distress beacon. Oops, an alien. Ripley escapes as a lone survivor, plus 1 cat. Roll credits. But it's the journey, the atmosphere, the tension that really drives the whole thing home. Alien could just be an over-budget short film and still hit the same beats, but it isn't. It takes its time, and that actually really works to its advantage. The characters are well acted and believable. The 2 grunts, Brett and Parker, are best buddies and don't really care about what's going on because they're only around for a half-decent paycheck. The other crew members, Dallas, Ripley, Lambert, and Kane, are a bit more involved, empathetic, and authoritative when needed. They have agency and personality. They're flesh and blood. And the science officer, Ash, well, he's got his own stuff going on. I mean, hell, it isn't even until we're about halfway into the movie that the actual alien shows up, and it's sudden and shocking. I only wish we got a bit more time with Kane, Sir John Hurt's character, because his death honestly fell a bit flat outside of the initial shock value. Also, you may see from the footage that I'm not sharing any part of the famously gory scene that I just referred to. Well, I prefer to actually get to do this YouTube thing for a living one day without getting myself in trouble with the censors so early on. But despite what happens, we still get plenty of character moments over the following hour. The world feels lived in, feels alive. By the end, when Ripley is the last one standing, it's somewhat tragic. It all works well together too. We barely get any questions answered. We don't know about the distress beacon, the alien ship, the facehugger, none of it. It's all left ambiguous, and that's honestly a little intimidating in a terrifying sort of way. It plays into that fear of the unknown by keeping things unknown. Then, when it's all over, the credits roll immediately. At first, I thought about this. There wasn't any plan for a sequel, so why end the whole thing so abruptly? Well, I have a theory. The film is actually about the alien. Shocker, I know. But what I mean to say is, the incident is over. It doesn't matter what happens to Ripley next because the danger has passed. At least, that was the idea. It was 2 hours long, succinct, and really gives a satisfying through line on the idea of the dangers to be found in the unexplored. So, do you remember how, in the beginning, I talked about how the first film to feature aliens back in 1902 was an interesting example of how foreign entities are frightening to a lot of people by default, whether or not they actually pose a threat? Yeah, so Aliens is about the Vietnam War. So Alien hits the silver screen in '79, and it's a smash, making loads of money and even becoming the first R-rated film to get its very own toy line. Take of that what you will. Countless scripts get passed around, and Sigourney Weaver, Ripley's actress, turns down each one, concerned that a poor sequel could sully the reputation of the first film. Then she sees the one written by James Cameron, hot off the heels of Terminator, and finally, Ripley wakes up from a cryogenic slumber after 7 years. She was mostly interested in a narrative through line about Ripley's motherhood. You see, Ripley is revealed to have had a daughter, but after waking up, so much time had passed that she actually outlived her. During the film, she finds Newt, an orphan survivor, and they become her surrogate child. At the same time, Cameron built the script as an allegory to the Vietnam War, basically criticizing how cocky the military was at the time, assuming that they could win the war easily with superior firepower. But they forgot two crucial facts. Firstly, they would be attacking someone's home territory, an environment the enemy would be much more familiar with, and two, maybe some of their soldiers were a little blinded by their overconfidence. So, like I said, Ripley wakes up much later than she intended to. Weyland-Yutani, the company that she used to work for and which has now also revived her, says that the original planet they got the distress signal from in the first film has since become a colony. Great. Also, just now, they've gone totally silent. Double great. So Ripley sets off with the Colonial Marines to try and figure out what's going on and save whoever they can. They find one survivor, Newt, and Ripley starts to watch over her. And now we have a teeny problem. In the theatrical version, the whole bit with Ripley's daughter is completely removed. The catalyst to the whole character arc is taken away and their relationship just kind of happens. Don't get me wrong, it still works, but the later editions of the film include that scene because, well, it's kind of important. In addition to extra context, it adds to the weight of problems that Ripley is dealing with. On top of what I've now covered, she's constantly being mocked or gaslit by those around her who simply don't believe her experiences. Couple that with some classic PTSD issues, and you've got a woman really on the brink. These extra layers add to the climax of the film pretty handily. Ripley's got a nice bouquet of issues, and in the finale gets a beautifully heroic and cathartic moment where she just absolutely rocks the nest of xenomorphs while en route to save Newt after they get separated. It's emotionally satisfying while being a heart-pumping segment that I honestly won't forget about anytime soon after I've finally explored these films again as an adult. Listen, I don't want to get myself into trouble by completely handing out the plot to everyone, but I'll just say that James Cameron took the original movie and made one of the best sequels to ever be put to film. It also does great work by standing on its own. Alien is a horror thriller, while Aliens is an action thriller. They're complementary to each other, instead of being twin films. But then, disaster struck. So listen, Sigourney Weaver has come to the aid of Alien 3's director, David Fincher, a lot when it comes to this movie. According to most sources, the problem wasn't him, it was pretty much all on Fox. Fincher tried desperately to make a decent movie, but, well, that didn't happen. It's contrived, sour, and mean-spirited. Everyone who survived the last movie is suddenly dead within the first 30 seconds of this one, except for Ripley, and it feels empty. Sure, they have a moment where Ripley looks over nude at the morgue, but even that feels unnaturally hollow. You have to wonder why they even made this choice creatively. Sure, maybe it's tragic for Ripley to be alone again, but it feels like they're punching down, and not a single character really fills any gap left by the other survivors from the last film. Also, the plot itself doesn't really have much going for it. Ripley wakes up on a prison planet, another alien pops up, and chaos reigns. Really pretty minimal stuff, if I'm being honest. There isn't any emotional weight like Aliens, and the tension of the original film is lacking as well. So now we get to why I chose the title 1-2 Punch, something I feel applies to plenty of trilogies or franchises. We get a great film, a decent or pretty solid follow-up, and then this sad, whimpering third portion that feels like a painful growth you don't even want to think about. Alien 3 is a wash. They tried one more time with Ripley and Resurrection, but honestly, the heart was gone. So some time passes, and we get this truly intriguing concept, written by James Cameron, directed by Ridley Scott, and starring Sigourney Weaver, Alien vs. Predator. The studio says no. A movie of the same name was still made, of course, but instead we get one that's rated PG and loosely based on a comic. Very loosely. But Arnold Schwarzenegger said he would reprise his role from Predator if he lost the California election for governor. Okay, so he was out too. But Lance Henriksen is cast instead as a continuity between this new character and Bishop from Aliens. How? Well, he's Charles Bishop Weyland, of course, so that means in 120 years, Weyland-Yutani will make a single android who looks just like him. Oi. So eventually, Sir Ridley Scott gives it another crack. He rocks up with the idea of a prequel exploring the origins of the xenomorphs and the giant creature from the '79 picture that everyone's taken to calling the Space Jockey. Prometheus is pretty heavy-handed with religious allegory. Scott even intended to reveal that one of the statuesque aliens, called Engineers, was in fact Jesus Christ himself. Oh boy. So somebody thankfully convinced him to not do that, but the final product still felt disconnected and honestly pretty uninteresting. It certainly has more acclaim than the other films that came out after Aliens, but still doesn't really cut the mustard for me, and plenty of other viewers as well. But it's not all bad. Alien Isolation is a video game darling and pretty perfect, but to finally reach the point I've been trying to make, when I think of Alien as a franchise, I see two beautiful and living films created by Sir Ridley Scott and James Cameron. Plus, 28 years later, we got a fantastic game. It doesn't need 7 sequels and an upcoming Disney Plus show. It just needs one. Alien and Aliens are a perfect 1-2 punch, and to me, the story ends with Ripley, Bishop, Hicks, and Newt. I'd like to thank everyone who made it to the end of this video. I know I usually talk about comics, but I hope you all don't mind if I stretch my legs a little. So if you liked the video, give it a like. If you liked me, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.